Hello and welcome to our 11th edition of FSI Fridays. I'm Johansson out of Charlotte, joined by Edwin in Boston. So Edwin, what exciting topics do we have for storing today?
Well, happy Friday, Johansson. You already know this, but I'm a huge self-proclaimed movie buff and cinephile. And the two things I immediately thought of after hearing this session title was HAL 9000 and Dave from 2001 Space Odyssey, and David from AI, which is ironically came out in 2001. But I digress. So going in the right direction, making sure we are building ethical and transparent AI is critical to drive trust in financial services. We'll explore how Microsoft is working with our customers to help them build AI solutions that drive transparency, manage risk, and drive inclusivity. Specifically, why responsible AI is crucial with this current pace of innovation, how a framework of principles is designed to earn trust, how and why we need to activate and scale responsible AI, and finally, we'll wrap it up with some Q&A today on FSI Fridays.
You said it, Edwin. Looking forward to having some fun with this one. As a quick reminder, we're going to spend 30 minutes or so taking our today's topic. We'll leave the last 10-15 minutes to address any burning questions. So please use the Q&A window and we'll monitor for those questions during the presentation. If you're watching on YouTube, feel free to use the comments below to ask your questions. So let's get started and meet today's presenters. We are joined by two extremely not artificially intelligent gentlemen focused on AI and financial services. Hi, Nick. Excited to have you here. I've always been fascinated with the cool work Microsoft Research is doing. Can you quickly tell us about your role?
Hey guys, yeah, it's great to be here. Yes, my name is Nick Lewins. I work in Microsoft Research. I'm the financial services lead for Microsoft Research. That means I'm kind of the go-between between the sort of 1,000-odd computer science researchers we have in Microsoft Research and our product groups and our key customers on all sorts of interesting technologies and their applications in the financial services industry.
Thanks, Nick. I love the background that you've got going there. You want to give us a little bit of detail? I heard you're a sailing fan.
Yes, I'm a bit of a sailing fan. This is a photo I took last year just off Seattle at one of the lovely summer afternoon sails that we had.
Well, Nick, I mean, the summer's going quickly, so totally that picture makes me want to visit the ocean this weekend. So thanks for sharing. Hi, Dara. Thanks for joining us. Do you mind briefly describing what your role and goals are at Microsoft?
Sure thing, Edwin. And it's fantastic to be here today on this channel. I think some of the content you guys are producing is really amazing. So it's fantastic to be here. Yeah, so my role, I sit in worldwide financial services and my focus is AI. And the cool thing in this job is I get to see all of the innovation that we're building out across this industry. And I make sure that we feed this back to our engineering teams so we can build out our cloud in the best way for financial services.
I mean, that's pretty awesome. What's even more awesome is I hear you have a superpower, specifically a superpower that most parents, including myself, would appreciate. What's that about?
Yeah, I think all of us as parents have it. My superpower is my ability to really embarrass my kids without trying, and it's specifically my dancing. And what was really funny recently was, there was a rumor about Microsoft acquiring TikTok, and I told them when that happened that I'd have to do dancing videos with them every day, and they were absolutely horrified. So I think they were horrified that I'd be putting that on their TikTok feeds. So yeah, so thank God I'm not going to do that, inflict that on them. But I think every parent has this ability to embarrass their kids.
Hey, listen, I'm already a fan of yours, and I'll be sure to subscribe to your TikTok channel. But let's go ahead and move on. But thank you for sharing that. I definitely have some dad dance moves myself. So anyway, I love this title, Journey to Responsible AI. Dara, can you tell us what it means, how things have evolved over the years, and why should financial services organizations pay attention to it?
Yeah, so I think we all know that AI is a technology that's innovating at an incredible pace. When we look at the kind of milestones on this slide, they were truly incredible. But I think AI's got some key differences to some other technology, and it's really around the proximity to human intelligence. The other thing that people aren't aware of is there's a huge amount of AI sort of happening around us all the time that's not necessarily visible to us. So examples are when you book an Uber, when you're looking at something on Amazon, or watching something on Netflix. Every day I listen to Spotify, and when I get to the end of my playlist, it starts playing songs that I actually love, but it seems to magically figure this out. And it's all really based on my past behaviors. And when we think about financial services, it's a really data-driven industry. There's multiple use cases where AI can really transform things like customer experience, how they can manage risk better, and then how they can protect their customers as they bank online with them. And financial services companies are really excited by these possibilities. But like any tool, AI can be a tool for good, but it also can introduce risk if it's not deployed in the right way, if it's not deployed ethically and transparently.
Yeah, Daryl, there are a lot of things about responsible AI that customers may not necessarily know about. Do you mind talking about a few of those?
Sure thing. So at the heart of AI, we have machine learning models that are presenting insights based on data and how it learns against those data. So for any model, we really need to understand how that model is working, what was the data that was used to train that model, and is there biases in either the model or the data? So to bring this back to a use case, what if somebody applies for a credit or a loan and for some reason they're denied? And if this was based on kind of biases in the data that were incorrect or something in the model that wasn't quite right, this introduces a lot of reputational risks for banks. And also the customer experience is pretty bad in that scenario. And we've had some kind of high profile examples of that. I think, you need to understand too, how you can explain how the model is working to your regulator. It's really important that we don't build black boxes where we don't know what's going on. Also, the last point on this slide I think is really interesting. Can the model be reproduced or stolen? We also have another angle of this in terms of cyber. Models present a new attack surface for cyber attackers. So if you're looking to kind of wreak havoc in a bank and you get into that model, you could tamper it in some way with a lot of kind of bad consequences. So I think, one of the things that we need to think about is, are we building it in the right way? Is it transparent, and can we explain it?
I think that's a fantastic point you made there, right? Microsoft invests $1 billion in security, and it almost goes hand in hand. And speaking of deep investments, Microsoft also deeply invests in the progress of responsible AI. So can you talk about how Microsoft has made this progress as a company?
Yeah, so we've been investing quite a lot of time over the last couple of years in building out our core mission, which is really empowering every person on the planet and every organization to achieve more. And that's all predicated on a platform of trust. So building trust in our platform is key to everything that we do, and it extends way past AI. So as we think about how we build AI into our products, there's a huge amount of work that we're doing to make sure that we're doing that in the right way. So we formed a set of ethical principles that we'll talk about in a moment. But we're really ensuring that we're just because you can do something, it doesn't mean you should do something. And if you do it, we want to make sure that you do it in the right way. You build it ethically and transparently. So principles are great if you don't kind of execute against them or you don't live by them. So we make this real through practices and policy. So an example of this is the cross-industry work group that we have at Microsoft, where different teams can take projects through a review, an ethical review. And in some cases, we'll walk away from a product if it doesn't meet the bar. Lastly, the tooling piece is a piece that I'm really excited about. We've taken the principles, and through the practice and policy, we can actually enforce them now in our platform. So we're embedding the tools in our platform that can help you build responsible and transparent AI. I think the key point on this slide, though, is this is a journey for everyone. And we're seeing some amazing work being done on our customers, where everyone is learning from each other, which is a key point on this journey. Nick's team has done some amazing work on the tools piece, and I'm going to pass to him. He's going to give us a quick kind of overview of the ethics and then talk about the tooling.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I mean, when we talk with customers, we do follow broadly these 3 steps as well. And one of the things to think about is that while Microsoft has declared our set of principles, different customer organizations will have different risk appetites. They'll be in different business lines, and they exist within different cultures globally. And so all of these things need to be factored in into the principles that each organization chooses to declare about ethical use, responsible use of AI. And so we help people through that journey. And so that's a piece of work that organizations need to do, and we believe they need to do up front, so that then they can move on to discussing their practices. When we're talking about practices, you usually find that financial services organizations already have a whole suite of governance capabilities. They have internal processes for secure software development and IT risk management, and they often have model risk management practices as well. And so really when these additional considerations come along for AI models, that these need to be incorporated into the organization's own existing practices. And then when it comes to tools, as you say, we've done a lot of work in Microsoft to package up tools and make them available to data scientists and quants in the industry. And so we do a lot of education on those tools. It's a rapidly moving area, but it's something that we work with customers all the time to make sure they're aware of how these tools work, what they can do with them, and what their limitations are as well.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to kind of diving deep into each of these different areas here with both of you. But one thing that is very true is AI isn't perfect. It's built off of training of models, etc. Could you give us an example of where something like this could go wrong?
Yeah, I mentioned the credit scenario a little bit earlier, but there's other ones that you see, we do see popping up from time to time. So even outside of this industry, last week we had a scenario where some children's exam results were adjusted downwards based on COVID because they weren't able to do their state exams. And again, this was a scenario, I think, where the model actually did what it was supposed to do, but we didn't have any accountability in terms of how that situation was managed. And again, this is just a personal opinion of mine, but when you think about if that project had been maybe looked at from the start to the end in terms of how it was being executed, I think it could have been we could have had a better outcome.
Yeah. So I'd love to kind of hear, Nick, your perspectives. Let's transition and kind of touch on these principles, the practices, and the tools. So let's spend a little time talking about the principles. Can you start with that?
Absolutely. Microsoft declared our principles in 2018 in an ebook, which people can find online, and I'm sure we can put the link in the chat for this. It's called The Future Computed, and if you look at these principles that we've declared, they're underpinned by two fundamental principles called accountability and transparency. Now, the way I think about these is that accountability means that the person deploying the model and the organization that chooses to deploy the model need to be accountable for the decisions that the model makes. There's no sort of excuse here of the algorithm did it, because that's dodging accountability. And then in terms of transparency, what this means is internally, you need to understand how these models work, particularly the material models that are being used for material decisions within financial services. You need to understand how they work so that you can actually undertake this analysis that sits above in these four things that sit above it. And as well as this, there's also kind of an external aspect of transparency as well, which we advocate for financial services that have a strategy to adopt AI to be transparent with their customers and with their regulators and with civil society at large about the way in which they intend to use AI, the reasons for using AI, and to engage that very broad group about their control framework and their approach in this case. Then once you have those two things in place, there are a range of outcomes at the top here relating to things like fairness, in terms of making sure that you're not discriminating against any protected classes in the way that you utilize these models. Reliability and safety. There are many deployment scenarios where AI is being used for things like autonomous driving and stuff like that, where actually human harm can come about if you deploy models erroneously. Then, of course, you've got privacy and security. These models are trained on a lot of data, and they execute inferences over a lot of very sensitive data. And Darrow has already touched on some of the sort of cybersecurity aspects as well. And then, of course, there's societal inclusiveness as well, because these models are doing things like steering people's attention, and we want to make sure that they're having an overall positive effect on inclusiveness in society. So this is the way that Microsoft thinks about the principles that are necessary to earn trust in all of the different ways in which we're deploying AI and helping our customers to deploy AI.
Yeah, Nick, I completely agree. Earning trust and providing transparency is absolutely critical, and it's not something easy to do. And on the other side of that is risk. So as I understand it, before machine learning models are created, they need to be trained to recognize patterns using training data. Can this be considered one of those sources of risk? And how do we make sure AI models don't end up skewed or biased?
Yeah, I mean, understanding of risk is fundamental to financial services, and financial services need to make risk-based decisions in order to make money. Generally, the best way to think about it is financial services shouldn't be avoiding risk. They need to be taking risks that they can understand and that they can manage. And so if you think about the sources of risk that can arise from use of AI and machine learning models, they're really in three buckets or categories here. There's a category of risk that arises from the data. The data that you use to train the model can have inherent biases in it. It can have poor data quality. And there's another category of risk that arises from the model. So you could have perfect data, but you might train a model which is inaccurate or which extrapolates erroneously for certain types of the input space. And then even if you have perfect data and perfect model, you might be using that the model in a business scenario or for an outcome that itself is high risk or carries risks associated with it. So an example here might be you might take an actuarial model that might predict loan defaults into the future on an aggregate basis for your entire loan book and work out your loss provisioning. And that's a very different use case from using that exact same model to specifically approve individual loans. And so when you're assessing risk, you need to assess the data and the model aspect in the context of the use case that you're particularly using the model for.
So, our financial services customers are extremely important institutions, like banks. And customers need to trust them. And so as banks need to manage their risk, many systems to manage risks, they have many of them. So how do these extra risks fit into the existing risk management frameworks that some of our customers already have and have spent years developing?
Yeah, exactly. The banks and financial service institutions typically have a very well-developed set of existing risk management frameworks. And these need to be extended and modified where they may be insufficient to cope with these new vectors of risk that I outlined in the previous page. So just to give some examples here, banks will typically have an underlying operational risk management framework. This is AI and ML risks are just another type of risk. There's no need to go and reinvent the operational risk management framework just because it's AI and machine learning types of risk that we're talking about. Then there'll be a privacy risk management framework, an IT risk management framework, a cyber risk management framework. These all need to be extended in some way to cope with these extra incremental risks from use of AI and machine learning. And then many banks will also have, and financial service institutions will also have some type of model risk management framework. And this has been around for quite some time where we're using statistical models, traditional statistical models, say in insurance or in banking. And these quite often really bring a lot of capabilities into the management of AI and machine learning risks. But then on the other hand, AI and machine learning use cases bring a bunch of additional things, such as increased sort of ethical risk and non-financial risks to the existing control framework that's implemented for model risk management. So really the game here is to understand the gaps of how to control these new risks using the existing frameworks, and then work on extending those frameworks so that these new categories of risk can also be controlled satisfactorily within risk appetite.
Yeah, Nick, I think the key point there is extending, right? It's not, starting from scratch or, creating all these new risk models. These organizations already have existing principles and practices around them. And it's really just about extending them to account for kind of these AI capabilities as well.
Exactly right. And, that's the set of practices that really we're talking about in the second of these three areas for all up approaching this question and resolving it in the context of financial services.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, we've covered two out of those three things so far, principles and practices, which are super important. What about the toolkit? I know one of you mentioned it's extremely important that this is a way and a vehicle to provide for Microsoft to provide this to customers to make it easier. So what is Microsoft doing to enable this?
So I think that one's to me, Edwin, right?
So, yeah.
You got
Yeah,
it.
so I think we think of it across three dimensions. Understanding how the models are running, protecting the data, and then control. And as I double click into each of these, understanding is really about the interpretability of the models, making sure that we eliminate the biases in both the model and the data, as we talked about. This is a space where we've built some tooling out, and I think we launched it at Build this year called FairLearn, and this is a set of tooling where you can look at a set of data and it will actually identify and mitigate the biases as you build the models out. I think in terms of protection, putting your data in the cloud is a journey that we've been on with our customers, and we're really adding to the security that's already there with things like differential privacy. This is where we're able to selectively mask the data, and so it's not in the clear as it sits in the cloud. So if you think about an Excel spreadsheet and you've got different columns, for example, we can sort of mask off rows, but actually allow data to be seen by the model where it makes sense to. We also have a thing called confidential computing, and essentially what we're doing here is not just protecting the data as it's at rest and in transit, but also as it's being processed inside the virtual machine. So with this technology, we can make this complete black box from the cloud provider perspective, which means that the data is encrypted all the way through end to end. So this becomes really belt and braces in terms of protecting data and confidentiality. Also on the last slide, we mentioned some of the work that we're doing on homomorphic encryption. That's quite an exciting new technology where we can encrypt data, put it in the cloud, and actually run AI against the encrypted data. So really opens up new scenarios for putting data in the cloud where we know it's completely secured. And lastly, in terms of control, we have a whole set of tooling around making sure that we can track how the models have been developed. So we can look at the complete end-to-end life cycle of a model, where we have a registry where we can track changes to the model. What were the changes made to the data, and what was the data used to track that model? And again, these are things that we're embedding into our products. We can actually automate a lot of this too with our machine learning ops platform, where we can actually build a kind of automated supply chain between when the model is built by the data scientist, as it's handed off to the infrastructure team, as it's tested, and then updated. Also, last point is all of the work that we're doing is open sourced, so we've put it on GitHub. So as well as being in our core Azure platform, we make these innovations available for the whole industry to use.
Yeah, Daryl, I think these tools are amazing, right? I think the fact that it's all open source and organizations can take advantage of them are amazing. So as a call to action, we're fortunate speaking to both who actually wrote these white papers on these topics that actually dive deeper. And it's really a great starting point for our customers and for our viewers that are listening now that are maybe in the start or in the middle of their journey around responsible AI. For those of you that are watching the recording, we're going to put the chat window or the comments description below where you can actually gain access to these white papers. But I think these are really valuable, and Nick or Daryl, I'd love to hear your perspectives on these white papers.
Yeah, I think the first one, the first white paper was really around the ethical principles, and the second one around governance and risk management was really about making it real with the tooling. Again, the key thing is here we did this. We kind of built this content out with our customers. We're learning from them, and they're learning from us. And when we see that partnership come together, I think it accelerates the whole process. And I still think there's a lot of learning to do. It's what I really like is it's a scenario where we've all applied a growth mindset, and we actually see the organizations coming together as well. Organizations, a lot of banks have realized that this is a common challenge that they all have. So they're all partnering on this topic as well. Nick, you might have some more to add there.
Yeah, one of the things I really like about these white papers is they're a starting point and provide a bunch of links to other resources, both inside Microsoft and from regulators and industry resources. And so they contain a really good set of starting points for people to start to explore this topic. And as well as that, we've also been doing a number of initiatives together with customers and with regulators to drive this whole space further forward to influence what's going on. I've just pulled up a couple of examples here of some of the work that we're doing on an ongoing basis with customers and regulators, such as the work that we did out of Singapore on the left-hand side with a number of customers and with Linklaters, which is all about this topic of how to move from principles to practice, particularly against the Singapore FEAT principles, they call them, the ethical AI principles that the Singapore regulator published about 18 months ago. And on the right-hand side, another example of a consortium that we're part of. We're part of a number of different consortiums. This one's the Veritas consortium that's been pulled together by the Singapore regulator, where, again, the theme is very much on the sort of principles into practice approach. These are all ways in which, as you said, Dara, that we're all learning together and we're publishing, what we learn into things like the toolkits that we talked about before.
This is going to be very interesting reading material. Dara, after I read one of these white papers, I'm going to go watch one of your TikTok videos of you dancing. So I be like, I know that guy. But Dara Morrissey and Nick Lewins, thank you for this fascinating and eye-opening session. What we've learned today is advancements in AI are different than other technologies because of the pace of innovation and its proximity to human intelligence, impacting us at a personal and societal level. Establishing a governance structure for guiding ethical principles is a great start, as it will serve as a foundation for all the company's activities related to AI. Then a center of excellence can develop and enforce policies and risk management frameworks that align to the organization's guiding principles surrounding AI. Check out Microsoft's toolkits available. Read the white papers on Microsoft's perspectives on responsible AI and governance and risk management in financial services. So really great stuff. Thanks again. Joe Hansen, what do we have going on?
Yeah, no, thanks for that great summary, Edwin. So let's move directly into Q&A. We've got a question here from James. And the question is, what's the role of regulators? How do they think about this conversation of responsible AI?
Nick, I'll let you take that one.
Okay, yeah, I mean, regulators are very active in this space. It's a very hot topic, and we talk to many regulators globally about their thoughts on how to tackle this space. Obviously, at the end of the day, the regulators want to see that any adoption of AI and machine learning techniques in the industry is safe and sound. And so the regulators kind of globally have taken various different approaches. Some of them have issued white papers and some regulatory guidance for comment. Others have issued a set of principles that they think organizations should comply with. And others are taking more of a supervisory approach of just asking banks and financial service institutions what they're doing as part of their routine audits of bank activities. So there's a range of different activities, as well as some of the regulators who are even moving into that sort of tools and coding end of the spectrum. So the regulators are very, very interested in this topic, and we've been spending a lot of time with global regulators to educate them and also to converge as much as possible onto a reasonably standard approach to regulating this across different countries, so that our customers don't necessarily have to deal with very many different regulatory regimes as they deploy these solutions in different geographies.
No, for sure. I mean, yeah, the regulation is a big piece of this. What I imagine too is you always see things in the headlines, right? Financial services organizations are always concerned of what can happen in the headlines. So, where can this go wrong? Is there an example, and how do we make sure that we prepare, to keep these stories positive?
Yeah, I was going to add to that, Edwin. Mm-hmm. I think, we talked a lot about, what could go wrong, but I'm really excited by the opportunities here where AI can really, really kind of be a force for good in financial services. We saw some examples of this through COVID. One of the partners that we have they've built out a self-driving financial management solution where it will sort of semi-autonomously manage your finances for you. What they did was they actually took that technology, and with some of the banks, they were able to use it to reach out to their customers proactively as they were experiencing financial difficulties. So let's say you were having trouble with a loan or a mortgage, they were able to proactively reach out to that customer and say, you know, do you want to defer the mortgage? Or if you're a small business, here's some government aid that you might not be aware of. And I also think that it's going to drive inclusivity. You know, when I came to the US first, I could not get any credit because I didn't have any credit history here. But I'd like to think I was pretty well paid from Microsoft, and I wasn't a credit risk. So some of the rules-based systems that we have, you know, I think as we add more AI to them and more data, we can start to extend credit and financial services to people that didn't have them before. And it's going to be especially important as we look to recover from COVID.
No, no, it's extremely important point. And going back to the headlines, you know where this can go wrong. I think it's important that there's so much good that can come of it, right? Technology, just in general, we've been able to make so many strides that we haven't had before in a positive way. But what about the headlines piece? You know, that definitely is top of mind for organizations.
Yeah, I think again, if you can put the right frameworks in place, I think it's a great start in terms of you know, having those missteps. I also think that executive alignment is really important. You know, when we formed our responsible AI function, it had sponsorship right at the top levels of the company. So it shouldn't be, you know, this shouldn't be something that you put in, you know, at a too low a level in the company. The groups that you put in and the oversight that you put in should have the right level of, you know, the right level of executive sponsorship. You know, we've had scenarios in Microsoft where, you know, we had projects where we walked away from, and you know, to walk away from a project, we had the right sponsorship to make sure that that wasn't going to be a problem for all the people that were impacted. So I think for us, putting in the right, you know, if you can put the right governance in place, you're going to avoid these situations.
Great. So we got another question in here from the chat window. This one's from Natalia. She's asking about, you know, where responsible AI is a industry in the financial services industry, or just in the industry at large. Nick, do you want to take this one?
Sorry, the sound dropped out. I couldn't quite get the question. Could you repeat it?
Sure. Yeah. It's where is responsible AI as a trend in the industry?
Oh wow, I would say that it's at the top of the sort of hype cycle at the moment. It's very, very hot, both with regulators and with customers. Last year, to me, seemed to be the year of publishing principles. There were so many principles, you know, being published last year. I think I saw a cross analysis of 23 or 24 different sets of principles that have been published. Hence our focus at the moment on converting the discussion about principles to the discussion about practices and then onto tools to actually bring this into reality. That's been our main focus, which is making things much more tangible and real for the data scientists and the governance people who actually need to do these things day to day.
No, thanks for sharing that. We have another question from Joan. What about the anti-money laundering scenarios? Is that, you know, are there scenarios that can come up?
I'll mention something on that, and then I'll hand over to Dara to provide some examples there. It was interesting that last year, a number of US regulators came out with a regulatory note. We were talking about regulators' attitudes a little bit earlier. They came out with a combined note encouraging banks to use AI and machine learning in the use case of anti-money laundering. So kind of an explicit encouragement. It's worth going and checking out that note just from the perspective of what a regulator is thinking about this technology. And so that has really encouraged the use of these technologies to undertake better management of financial crime, which basically makes the entire banking system safer and has some fantastic societal outcomes. Dara, do you want to pick up from there?
Yeah, I think the whole financial crime space is one that's kind of perfect, a perfect match for AI, where we're looking for suspicious patterns or anomalies. And actually a great place to start for organizations, because the business case can stack up very, very quickly. We see a lot of those systems as well were rules-based in the past. As you bring more AI to them, we can help intelligence officers reduce the amount of false positives and investigations they have to run. And I also think, as we saw with COVID, there was a lot of fraud activity happening in the banking and insurance space. And it was great to see, some of the tooling that's been put in actually be quite effective in terms of protecting customers.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Dara. This has been a very fascinating session. Really, I'm sure our customers are enjoying this as well. Thanks everyone for attending. If you're watching on YouTube, feel free to use the comment section below to ask any additional questions. Be sure to go in, and if you want feedback or some follow-up, please use our link, aka.ms FSI Fridays feedback. Be sure to subscribe and like our YouTube channel and share this video with your colleagues. So Edwin, we are entering Security September. Why don't you give us a preview of what we have next?
Oh, definitely. So we will be resuming the Friday after Labor Day. So starting on September 11, we'll be talking about a critical enabler in your cloud journey through Azure Security Center. On the 18th, we're going to go talk about modernizing security operations with one of my favorite people, Steve Fail. And then on the 25th, we're going to be talking about managing and patching and updating. Oh my, how Microsoft is managing machines for customers now. You won't want to miss it. And thanks, and see you next time on FSI Fridays.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.